Hello, Taurus, and welcome back. I'm really glad you're here today. Take a moment to settle in, get comfortable, and simply allow yourself to be present with whatever message finds its way to you. As always, take what resonates and leave the rest behind. The first card resting on the table is the Six of Cups. As soon as it appears, it brings me into the feeling of familiarity. Not necessarily because someone is constantly thinking about the past, but because there was a time when your presence felt natural to them. Almost expected. Like something that would always be there no matter how much attention they gave it. You know, sometimes people don't intentionally take someone for granted. Life gets busy. Priorities shift. Days become weeks. Weeks become months. They get caught up in their own plans, their own worries, their own goals. And somehow they begin assuming that certain people will remain exactly where they left them. The energy around this connection feels a little bit like that. The Six of Cups keeps drawing my attention back to moments that may have felt ordinary at the time. Conversations, shared routines, little habits, things that didn't seem important while they were happening. Yet those are often the very memories that return when someone realizes they can no longer reach them as easily as before. Then I see the Page of Swords. And honestly, Taurus, this card feels curious. Very curious. It's almost like someone is looking toward a closed door and wondering what is happening on the other side. Not because they were wondering yesterday, not because they were wondering last month, but because recently something shifted. The access feels different. The energy feels different. Maybe there was a time when they knew exactly what you were doing, what you were thinking, where your attention was going. Maybe communication was more open. Maybe they never questioned whether you would be around. Yet something about your energy now feels less available, less predictable. And that's creating questions. A lot of questions. The Hierophant appears next, and what stands out isn't what this card means. It's the atmosphere surrounding it. There is a sense that this person became comfortable inside a certain pattern, comfortable inside a routine, comfortable believing things would continue exactly as they had before. People rarely question stability while they still have it. They question it when it begins to move. They notice it when it starts slipping through their fingers. And that's the feeling I keep getting here. Not panic, not desperation, just that strange realization that something they thought was permanent may actually be changing. Okay, Taurus, let me explain what I'm seeing. Imagine someone walking through the same neighborhood every day for years. They pass the same house, the same tree, the same familiar street corner. They stop noticing it because it becomes part of the background. Then one day they walk by and everything looks different. The house is gone. The tree has been cut down. The familiar view has changed. Suddenly they remember every detail. Suddenly they realize how much that familiar presence meant to them. That's the feeling surrounding these cards. And then we arrive at the Four of Pentacles. This card feels quiet. Very quiet. It feels like someone holding tightly to what they understand because they're not completely comfortable with change. They may not even realize how resistant they are to it. Yet your energy feels different now. More self-contained, more focused on your own path. There is something about you in this reading that feels less concerned with being available all the time. And the moment that happened, their attention shifted. Funny how that works sometimes. When people know exactly where you are, they relax. When they no longer know, they start paying attention. The Page of Swords keeps returning to the surface. Almost as if this person is observing from a distance, trying to understand what changed. Trying to figure out whether the distance they feel is real or whether they're imagining it. What they may not fully understand is that the change didn't happen overnight. Feels like something that developed quietly. One small step at a time. One realization at a time. And because it happened gradually, they may have missed it while it was happening. The cards don't show me someone who suddenly woke up one morning with all the answers. They show me someone beginning to notice an absence. Beginning to notice a shift. Beginning to realize that your presence may have been far more meaningful than they once allowed themselves to see. And Taurus, that realization feels like it's only just beginning. The Tower appears on the table, Taurus, and the feeling surrounding it is strangely quiet. Not loud, not dramatic. More like a moment when someone is sitting alone with their thoughts and suddenly realizing they can't distract themselves anymore. You know those evenings when the house is calm, the television is off, the phone isn't ringing, and there is nothing left to focus on except whatever has been sitting in the back of your mind? That's what this energy feels like. Something keeps returning to them. Not because they're trying to revisit it. Not because they're intentionally searching for it. It simply keeps finding its way back. A memory. A conversation. A moment they didn't think much about when it happened. The tower has a way of bringing unexpected realizations into view, and it feels like this person is beginning to see certain things from a different angle than before. The strange part is that nothing may have happened externally. Life keeps moving. Days continue passing. People go to work. People make plans. Everything looks normal from the outside. Yet internally something feels unsettled. And that's where the Nine of Swords enters. Oh my God, Taurus, this card feels restless. Not because someone is losing control. More because their mind refuses to stay quiet. Questions keep showing up. Questions they never felt compelled to ask before. Questions they don't necessarily have answers to. What if I misunderstood something? What if I overlooked something important? What if there was more to this connection than I allowed myself to believe? The energy feels like someone turning over old memories and examining them under a different light. Details they ignored before suddenly seem significant. Words that felt ordinary begin carrying a different weight. Even silence starts telling a story. And what makes it more complicated is that certainty doesn't seem available to them right now. The moon is sitting here beside these cards, and the atmosphere changes immediately. Everything feels less clear, less predictable. They don't know what your days look like. They don't know what occupies your attention. They don't know who you spend your time with. They don't know whether you've completely moved on, or whether this connection still crosses your mind from time to time. And when people don't know, they often start imagining. Sometimes those imaginations become bigger than reality itself. One possibility becomes 10 possibilities. One unanswered question becomes 20. A small uncertainty begins creating entire stories. That's what keeps coming through. There is a feeling of wondering, a feeling of filling in blanks, a feeling of trying to understand something without having all the pieces. The moon keeps pulling them deeper into that space. The more they want clarity, the more they become aware of how little clarity they actually have. What stands out to me is that they aren't only thinking about you. They're thinking about themselves too. They're revisiting choices, revisiting reactions, revisiting moments where they may have assumed things would simply work themselves out. And that's where the Five of Cups quietly arrives. This card feels reflective, almost tender. There is something about it that feels connected to missed opportunities. Not necessarily because something is permanently gone, just because distance has a way of showing us things we couldn't see while we were standing too close. I keep feeling these little flashes of memory around this card. A laugh they suddenly remember. A message they forgot about. A conversation they once rushed through. Moments that seemed insignificant at the time but feel different now. Funny how memory works that way. It rarely brings back the grand events first. It often returns with the smallest details. The sound of someone's voice. A familiar frase. A look. A feeling. And those details seem to be lingering around this person more often lately. The Five of Cups doesn't feel like someone arriving at conclusions. It feels more like someone sitting with emotions they haven't fully processed yet. There is uncertainty here. There is curiosity here. There is regret here. And mixed into all of that is a growing awareness that not knowing what is happening in your world has become much harder than they expected. The moon keeps casting shadows across the reading, making everything feel slightly out of reach. The tower keeps asking uncomfortable questions. The Nine of Swords keeps bringing those questions back late at night. And the Five of Cups keeps turning their attention toward moments they once believed would always be available to revisit. Something about this energy feels unfinished. Not because an outcome is guaranteed. Not because anyone knows what comes next. Only because their thoughts seem to be traveling in circles, returning to the same place again and again, searching for something they haven't quite found yet. The Page of Swords shows up again, Taurus, and this time the feeling is different. Less questioning. More attentive. Almost like someone who keeps telling themselves they're just casually looking, just casually wondering, just casually checking. Yet somehow they keep returning to the same place. You know what this reminds me of? Walking past a familiar cafe after months of taking a different route home. First you barely notice it. Then one day you glance through the window. The next day you look again. Before long you find yourself slowing down every time you pass, wondering if something inside has changed. That's the energy surrounding this person. Little things are catching their attention lately. Tiny details. Things they probably would have overlooked before. A new photo. A different mood. A subtle shift in the way you present yourself. Even the absence of information seems to hold meaning. The Page of Swords keeps leaning closer to the story, as if searching for clues that might explain something they haven't fully understood yet. And what's interesting is that they don't appear to be looking for dramatic answers. They're looking for you. Not necessarily the version of you they knew before. The version of you that exists today. The version that has continued growing while they were focused elsewhere. Because something feels different. They can sense it. Maybe they can't explain it. Maybe they don't even know exactly what changed. But they feel it. The moon drifts across the reading again, and immediately the atmosphere becomes softer, quieter, more reflective. The strange thing about distance is that it leaves room for imagination. When people have access to someone every day, they rarely wonder. Wonder begins when visibility disappears. And with the moon here, there seems to be a lot of wondering, a lot of imagining, a lot of trying to fill in spaces that no longer come with easy explanations. I keep getting this image of someone opening a social media page, scrolling for a moment, finding almost nothing they were hoping to find, and somehow leaving with even more questions than they had before. Not because anything bad happened. Not because there is some hidden secret. Simply because mystery has entered a place that once felt familiar. And mystery has a way of pulling people closer, especially when emotions are involved. The Hermit appears and the energy slows down. This card feels personal, private, the kind of reflection people don't always talk about. Because sometimes curiosity isn't really about gathering information. Sometimes curiosity is a doorway leading toward self-discovery. This person may have started by trying to understand you, yet somewhere along the way they began learning things about themselves. They began noticing how often their thoughts drift in your direction, how frequently your name crosses their mind, how certain memories seem to arrive without invitation, how certain moments still carry emotional weight. The Hermit feels like someone sitting quietly with those realizations, not rushing, not forcing answers, just observing, watching their own thoughts unfold. And Taurus, there is something surprisingly honest about that energy. Because once people stop distracting themselves, they often encounter truths they weren't expecting. The Six of Cups enters the reading like a familiar song playing unexpectedly in the background. A song you haven't heard in years. A song you didn't plan on listening to. Yet the moment it starts, memories come rushing back. That's what this card feels like. Not living in the past. Not getting stuck there. Just remembering. A place. A conversation. A feeling. A version of life that existed when certain people occupied a bigger space in each other's world. Oh my God. It's almost as though memories are showing up in the most ordinary moments. Driving somewhere. Standing in line. Folding laundry. Making coffee. Nothing dramatic. Nothing cinematic. Just little reminders appearing out of nowhere. The kind that makes someone pause for a second longer than expected. The Six of Cups feels warm here. Bittersweet, perhaps. Because the more they reflect on these memories, the more they begin recognizing how much they valued experiences they once considered ordinary. And that's where the energy starts shifting. Curiosity no longer feels separate from emotion. The two become intertwined. Wanting to know how you're doing slowly becomes wanting to feel close to your world again. Wondering what changed slowly becomes remembering why your presence mattered in the first place. The Page of Swords may have opened the door, but the Six of Cups is gently drawing their heart further inside. There is still uncertainty surrounding this connection. The moon makes sure of that. There are still unanswered questions. The Hermit continues exploring them. Yet beneath all of it, a quieter feeling seems to be growing. Not loud enough to demand attention. Not strong enough to force action. Just steady enough that it keeps returning every time they think they've moved on to something else. The Two of Cups settles onto the table, Taurus, and the atmosphere shifts again. Not because everything suddenly becomes clear, but because something feels more honest than it did before. You know, there are moments in life when people spend so much time analyzing a situation that they completely miss what their heart has been trying to tell them. They keep searching for explanations. They keep looking for logic. They keep convincing themselves that certain feelings will eventually fade if they ignore them long enough. Yet feelings have their own timing. their own rhythm. And that's what I'm sensing here. This person may have spent a long time focusing on circumstances, distractions, responsibilities, and everything happening around them. But the Two of Cups feels like a moment when their attention quietly returns to what they actually feel. Not what they should feel. Not what makes the most sense. Just what is there. And what is there seems difficult to dismiss. The connection itself appears different through their eyes now. Not larger. Not more dramatic. Just more meaningful. It's almost as if they're revisiting memories and experiences with a level of appreciation they didn't possess before. Things they once considered ordinary begin revealing a different kind of value. The sound of your voice. The way conversations flowed between you. The comfort that existed without needing constant explanations. Little pieces that only become visible when someone takes enough time to truly look. The Knight of Cups moves into the reading, and I immediately feel a softer energy. Less guarded. Less defensive. More willing to acknowledge emotions rather than avoid them. Okay, Taurus, this card doesn't feel like someone preparing a grand speech. Feels more personal than that. More vulnerable than that. Almost like someone rehearsing conversations in their mind that may never happen. Thinking about things they wish they had said. Thinking about questions they wish they had asked. Thinking about moments where they could have been more open. You know how sometimes people imagine a future conversation while driving alone or lying awake at night? Not because they know it will happen. Just because their heart keeps wandering there. That's what this energy reminds me of. There is a tenderness surrounding it. A willingness to look at the connection with fewer defenses than before. And honestly, Taurus, that may be unfamiliar territory for this person. The Temperance card appears and everything slows down. The energy becomes calmer. More thoughtful. More mature. What stands out isn't urgency. It's patience. This person doesn't seem trapped in the same emotional storm they were moving through before. Something inside them feels more balanced. More willing to see multiple perspectives. More willing to acknowledge that every story contains experiences they may not have fully understood at the time. The Temperance card feels like someone sitting quietly with their thoughts instead of running from them. Allowing different pieces of the puzzle to settle into place naturally. Allowing understanding to arrive on its own. There is something surprisingly peaceful about this energy. Not because everything has been resolved. Not because every question has been answered. Simply because resistance seems to be fading. And once resistance fades, people often begin seeing things they couldn't see before. The Empress enters the reading with a presence that is impossible to ignore. Oh my God, Taurus. This card feels beautiful here. Not in a romanticized way. Not in a fantasy. More in the sense of recognition. The kind of recognition that happens when someone realizes the value of something after stepping back far enough to view it clearly. The Empress keeps drawing attention toward you. Toward your growth. Toward the way your energy seems different now. Not because you've become someone else. Because you've continued becoming yourself. There is something about your presence that feels stronger. More grounded. More complete. And this person appears to be noticing that. Maybe they notice it through small changes. Maybe they notice it through the way you carry yourself. Maybe they can't even identify exactly what it is. Yet they feel it. The Empress has a way of highlighting things people once overlooked. And that's exactly what this card feels like. Recognition. Appreciation. Awareness. Noticing qualities that were always there but never fully acknowledged. The Two of Cups remains at the center of everything, quietly reminding them of the connection itself. The Knight of Cups keeps drawing their attention toward what remains unspoken. Temperance encourages reflection instead of reaction. And the Empress keeps illuminating the value they may not have understood before. What I'm seeing here isn't someone arriving at a final destination. It's someone arriving at a deeper understanding. A realization that certain connections leave a lasting imprint. A realization that some people become woven into our memories in ways we don't fully comprehend until much later. And somewhere within that understanding, a gentle desire seems to be emerging. Not to rewrite the past. Not to force an outcome. Just a sincere wish to feel closer to something that has become far more important than they once realized. The Knight of Pentacles rests on the table, Taurus, and the moment I see it, I don't feel urgency. I don't feel dramatic declarations. I don't feel someone rushing toward a conclusion. I feel hesitation. Careful consideration. The kind that happens when someone understands that certain things matter too much to approach recklessly. This energy reminds me of a person standing outside a familiar house after a long time away. They know the address. They know the path that leads to the front door. Yet they remain still for a moment longer than necessary. Not because they don't want to knock. Because they're thinking about what happens after the door opens. What would they say? What would they hear? What if the conversation goes differently than expected? What if too much time has passed? The Knight of Pentacles feels connected to those questions. A desire seems to exist here, but it moves carefully, slowly, almost cautiously. And honestly, Taurus, that pace feels very aligned with the energy surrounding this entire story. Nothing here feels impulsive. Nothing feels rushed. The distance itself appears to have taught this person something. Whether they fully understand the lesson or not is another matter. Yet the awareness feels present. Justice appears beside the Knight of Pentacles, and suddenly the focus shifts. Less attention goes toward emotions. More attention goes toward accountability. The feeling I get from this card is interesting because it doesn't seem concerned with assigning blame. Instead, it feels like someone trying to understand the truth of a situation. Not their version. Not your version. Just the truth. And that's often more difficult than people expect. Because truth requires honesty. Not only about what happened, about how we contributed to what happened. Yeah, this card feels reflective in a very mature way. I keep sensing someone revisiting certain memories and seeing them differently than before. Moments where they may have dismissed your perspective. Moments where they may have assumed there would always be another opportunity. Moments where they simply didn't understand the impact of their choices. Justice feels less interested in punishment and more interested in balance. The desire to make something right. The desire to understand what fairness would actually look like. And perhaps that's why the idea of a conversation keeps lingering around this reading. Not because every wound can be erased. Not because every story receives a perfect ending. Simply because understanding often begins when people become willing to look at things honestly. Judgment enters the reading next, and oh my God, this card changes the atmosphere immediately. There is something deeply personal about it. Not dramatic. Not overwhelming. Just deeply personal. It feels like standing at a crossroads after a long journey, and realizing that continuing forward requires a decision. A real decision. Not avoidance. Not distraction. Not pretending emotions aren't there. The energy surrounding judgment feels like someone becoming aware that they can no longer keep placing these thoughts on a shelf and walking away from them. The connection continues returning. The questions continue returning. The feelings continue returning. Sooner or later, people begin asking themselves what they're going to do with all of that. I don't necessarily see answers here. What I see is awareness. Awareness that something meaningful happened. Awareness that certain emotions remain unresolved. Awareness that ignoring those emotions has become increasingly difficult. And sometimes awareness itself becomes the first meaningful step. Not because it solves everything. Because it creates movement where there was once stagnation. The star appears as the final card, and the energy softens once more. There is a tenderness here that I wasn't expecting. A gentleness. Almost like someone looking toward the horizon after a long night and noticing the first signs of morning. Not because everything is suddenly perfect. Not because every uncertainty has disappeared. Just because hope has quietly entered the room. The star feels connected to possibility. The possibility of healing. The possibility of understanding. The possibility that what feels broken today may not remain broken forever. And what I find most interesting, Taurus, is that this card doesn't feel attached to a specific outcome. It isn't demanding a particular ending. It simply leaves space for one. The Knight of Pentacles continues considering the next step. Justice continues searching for honesty and balance. Judgment continues asking deeper questions. And the star keeps a small light burning in the distance. Whether this person eventually reaches for a conversation, reaches for reconciliation, or simply continues reflecting on what this connection has meant to them, the cards suggest that something inside them has changed. Distance may have created separation, but it also created perspective. The things they once overlooked seem harder to overlook now. The feelings they once pushed aside seem harder to dismiss now. And perhaps that's where this story wishes to rest for the moment. Not with certainty, not with promises, but with a heart that appears far more aware of its own truth than it was when this journey first began.